Hello, everybody. Savannah Newton here for Black Barn Fine Art Studio. We have a special treat for you guys today. We are going to be talking to Derek Gundy, who actually is one of our lead folks who runs a lot of the operations for Black Barn Fine Art Studio. We're going to be talking to him about the studio itself, his work, and the classes that we have to look forward to coming up. So here we go. Hello, Derek.
Hey, Savannah.
How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you doing today?
Doing good. It's March in Wyoming, so it's we're heading to spring. We're getting there.
Merry Christmas.
You guys got snow this year up in Washington too, though, like a lot.
Some snow, a week of brutal cold, and some close to quarter size hail. That was no fun, but we're past it now.
And things are looking pretty beautiful at the studio right now. I saw a shot out the window
Starting
recently.
to green out. Yeah.
That's so nice.
We've
And
been
beautiful.
waiting for this. This is one of the things that makes the studio very special is the beautiful property. So
Gonna get to do little walking tours in the middle of class and everything. You guys have probably done that a little bit, in the winter season.
absolutely. Everybody likes to visit with the horses. And there's Eileen's putting in a lot of beautiful plants. There was a couple, one or two truckloads of different trees and things that were being put in. Since you visited the property, it's been dressed up quite a bit,
Ooh.
especially between like the studio and the house. So it's looking great.
Cool. I'm excited to see it again. I always love getting up there in spring and stuff and seeing all the cherry blossoms. And
There's no better place for spring than the Pacific Northwest.
yeah, it's my favorite season. Out here, it's just mud and melting snow, but it's still my
Nice.
favorite season because I know that up where you guys are at, there's all the bloomings. Well, I have a few questions for us to talk through today, and I'm kind of excited because I feel like everyone on the peninsula in the art scene knows you in some way because you've been so intertwined between the art school up there, people buying their art supplies, people getting their framing done, and then workshops and everything. I feel like even at the nonprofits, it was like even the nonprofits that you weren't involved in, like everyone knew who Derek Gundy was because like your name is kind of synonymous with the arts in the Olympic Peninsula. um, but something that I think is interesting is that you're not originally from the Olympic Peninsula, right? You're originally
Right.
from back east.
I'm originally from Maine, I guess. Well, I was born in Pennsylvania, but we moved to Maine when I was 2. Um, so I'm familiar with mud season, as you call it, as well.
Yeah.
And I think my friends back in Maine, even today, they're having a lot of power outages, and
Oh.
a lot along the coast, they're having a lot of. There's a huge snowstorm there, which for early April is not unheard of, but it's a little rare.
Yeah.
But yeah, I spent probably 30 plus years in Maine, growing up, in an art related business as well.
Yeah, so your family ran like a whole big like arts and framing store and business, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it kind of dictated the direction of my career in a sense. And so I remember, I don't remember how old I was, but I was pretty young. My dad was teacher at a local junior high school, and my mother had she got a job as a picture framer at a glass company, but it was a place that did like windshields and stuff. So looking back on that now, it might seem like an odd mix, but then probably in the 70s it seemed somewhat normal. And so she was really enjoying learning the picture framing. And then my parents had the opportunity to buy an art supply and office supply store that had declared bankruptcy. It was called Houston Tuttle, still exists today. And they started running it. My mom would run the store during the day, and then after 3 o'clock, Dad would come and help close things out. But I just had my hands on all this stuff, and I remember there was just all kinds of fun pens and paints and even like instructional books,
Hmm.
right? How to draw comic books, stuff like that. And so it's interesting to think about it, but looking back on it, I think one of the reasons that I tend to do a little bit of everything is because when I was 8 or 9 years old, that was my playground, was 5 or 6 aisles of art supplies.
Something that I think is really cool about that, I mean, aside from just the fact that it didn't turn you away from the arts, because I think that some people probably could have taken that a different way and, like, wanted to, like, head for the hills. Um, but I also think it's really interesting that, basically your upbringing in the arts, it wasn't it like, people enjoy drawing and whatever, and they do kind of like the fluffy part of it, and then they go to art school, which is kind of more of, like, fluffy part of it. But where you were raised in it, you were kind of raised in art as a business. So it
Yeah,
seems like you were trained from the time that you were, a tiny child, like, on how art is profitable or things like around art is profitable. So it's like
sure.
art as a whole lifestyle and not just, something you wait for your big break in.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear you put it that way. It's so true because I'm approaching my mid 50s, and what has been wonderful about my life so far is that um, almost everything I've done has been connected to art one way or the other. But yeah, the business aspect, like I learned a lot from my parents early on. My mother added the framing to the business, those art supplies and office supplies. And then we started hanging artwork for local artists, including some of my dad's students at the junior high and high school. And then as the business grew, we became more of a gallery destination in an already very artsy area, Rockland, Maine. The Wyeths were there, the Farnsworth Art Museum. And so, um, my parents started one of the first art galleries to really kind of get that scene going, particularly in the early 80s. And it's a really thriving arts community now. And it was back then too. But I probably was 12 years old when I'd get excited about seeing my dad sell a piece of art of somebody that I knew, and I'm like, hmm, maybe I could do that someday.
Yeah, I feel like that's so invaluable because I think that people tell a kid that they're good at art and then they pursue it, but there's so much that's like lacking in kind of reality in it. And then, kids they don't find out until they're, 19 years old and they're going to art school and then they have to like figure out how to kind of like practically their skills somewhere.
Sure.
Um, and I think that that's I don't know. I wish that there was more of that thinking about it, like, in the way that we're presented art from a younger age. I wish that there was, like, more of that reality for us to learn about.
Well, we're working on that all the time.
Yeah. Well, so you've heavily gone into teaching, and you just said that your dad also taught art. Was he, like, really encouraging of you to pursue that after you kind of, like, grew up and went to school, or did that happen kind of on your own naturally?
I think because teaching was in the family, it was always encouraged, but I don't like when I was young. And so, just to back up a little bit, I went to Maine College of Art in Portland, Maine. So, I was about an hour and a half away from where my parents' business was. And when I graduated 4 years later, I moved back to the Mid Coast area, and I wanted to go to work for the family business. So, I kind of had one of the best hand ups in early careers. Like it was already established, and I could just kind of plug into that. And there, I was doing work. I was selling work off the walls. Just even in my early 20s, which was great. But I wasn't really doing much teaching then. And then I want to say when I was like 25 or 26, people would see the art on the walls and they would ask uh, if could you teach me to do that. So I think the early teaching that I did was like one-on-one, one easel in my living room. Somebody would come over and like pay me $25 to, give them some lessons on this or that type of drawing. And I suppose that's kind of how I got my start.
Did you feel
Um,
passionate about it when you were doing it at that point, or did you just feel like it was just like, "Well, they want me to teach them a thing, so I'm just gonna take some time?"
I did. I felt good about it, but I for sure could not see ahead to what I'm doing now, right? um, and it's kind of interesting because a lot of the teaching really happened when I moved out west. Um, and looking back on it, we had this huge 3-story building with lots of gallery space. And looking back on it, I was like, oh my gosh, if I had known what was coming for my career, I might have tried to start this when I was 27. But the truth is that we learn by doing, and it's not really about having an idea and doing it. It's about developing the teaching skills along the way through your dealings with people. And so um, that probably wouldn't have worked out, but it would have been a great facility for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I bet just existing in there for, at being raised and then getting to work in there, professionally and stuff was probably just like a really good, like immersive experience. Cause I think that was my like really transformational for me is getting to work in an art supply store and getting to like help other artists figure things out, but then also like kind of be like fed by other artists at the same time, like just kind of being in
Right.
your element.
Yeah. No, it was great. We were part of you and I were in Paulsbo, we're part of a thriving small town. But every once in a while, Andrew Wyeth would come in and buy watercolor paper and Winsor Newton watercolors and stuff like that, and a ton of brushes. And you'd just be like, so it was great. And at first it was kind of this celebrity thing. And then after a while, it's just like, well, they're just really community members. And a lot of other amazing artists that I got to not only sell supplies to, but to do picture framing for shows like Alan McGee, who was really well known in the 80s for these very realistic stone paintings. Um, and just countless others that would just kind of connect to us through the shop. And it was a good early shot in the arm, for me to work with them. I worked with a lot of other galleries, so I got to see how a lot of other galleries worked. Um, so it's kind of funny looking back on it. I think I left Maine when I was about 33. And I think at that point, most people in their early 30s think they've accomplished the main part of what they're going to accomplish. And I just couldn't have seen that there was all these additional chapters coming
So much.
that
Yeah.
were kind of feeding off of that. I thought I was done selling art supplies, and then what, what happened. I got out here and I lived here for probably about a year and a half, poking around with different things, and then got hired at Artist Edge and got to work with you and so many other great artists there for close to 14 years,
Wow.
right? And it was kind of an opportunity to manage a smaller business than the one my parents had grown it into, but it was like all the same stuff. So to me, it just felt like who I was.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And, I feel like you were teaching me so much while I was at Artist Edge, like, I feel like I learned so much just about, like, arts in general, and then, of course, all the important pieces of, like, supplies and framing and everything, and it turned me into a total frame nerd,
Yes.
and still am, and just your passion and kind of just natural I don't know, wisdom in teaching was just like really evident even when you weren't teaching. And then obviously you developed kind of a robust like curriculum just, in the back of the art supply store and then on the streets of Seattle where you guys would take your walking tours and everything. Um, and then seeing you like heavily transition and then teaching really formally in the Northwest College of Art and Design. Like having that kind of not Wild West, but sort of Wild West, like like freelance teaching and then like going into the very like formal higher education.
Mhm.
How different do you feel like how much do you feel like you've changed in going back and forth between those two?
Well, it's kind of, I think for starters, it's not like a split personality thing. It's not like there's a lot of common things, but one thing I want to kind of go back on though, just to think the interesting thing about that shop where we both worked is when I started working there were no classes, right? And so I think I'm just realizing that now and how similar it was to my parents' business. Uh, I kind of was like, I'd like to add classes to this and demonstrations. And the first person that I contacted was Eileen Sorg. And that is how, so that kind of is an interesting spin into this. That's how Eileen and I met is I wanted somebody that could help us sell the colored pencils, right, and demonstrate them. And so I did a Google search for colored pencil realism in the Puget Sound, and I came up with her work, her early work, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is fantastic. But it didn't say where she was, and I just wrote her an email, and she wrote right back and said, sure, I'd love to do a demonstration. And I think we gave her like a small store credit for that, but she just kind of came in and did that. And I was like, would you like to, teach some classes? And so we were doing these 2-day workshops, I don't know, 17, 18 years ago. It's kind of interesting to think back with that. Um, and so I think what I was saying with that was, okay, all this art business is great, but education has to come along for the ride with me. So I want to interject that. But back to your question about how the things are different, I don't know. When you have smaller groups and maybe you have a workshop and it's one and done, or maybe they're just with you for a few weeks. I don't know. You're catering a little bit more to what they want. If you're teaching them watercolor or drawing or collage or whatever it is, you're kind of catering to the individual and you're having a conversation. They're usually smaller groups, and you try to help them develop the skills that they already have and feel better about themselves and learn some new techniques in a very short amount of time. With the stuff at NCAD, which I've actually almost to the day I've been teaching there 8 years now, and
Wow, time
isn't
flies.
it crazy? I wished it was 10 because I applied and then it took a couple years to get hired on. It took like a teacher kind of stepping aside for me to have a spot. Um, but I love that. But it's still some of that same stuff, but it's different. Um, I didn't have to do the marketing. Like the school provides the students for you. Students there are also on this track of it's a career school, so they're looking to become very good at what they do, but also get a job doing it. And so each semester is like 15 weeks at a time. So I think when I first started teaching there, I was in a hurry to get results. And then after a couple of years, I realized just from the process of doing it that no, this is a long-term process. They have me for figure drawing for 15 weeks. Then we move on to painting, and it still might not be at a professional level, but the goal is at the end of these 3 years to have the skills to then go on and get hired. Um, so, and it's been great because I think young people have one wonderful energy, and I remember what it was like to be 18 and 19 and kind of want to take the world on, and moving away from home, and oh my gosh, I get to do all this art, and then after a while, it's like, oh my gosh, I have to do all this art.
Yep,
But
learning
so
the
it's a
different.
really immersive process, and I like that. Whereas some of the the smaller stuff, like even the 2-day workshop that I taught in March at Black Barn, it was a great 2 long days for those students to learn some things about light and shadow and watercolor and architectural elements. Um, but now they can kind of go back to their own work and pick little pieces of that. So a lot of similarities. I
Yeah,
like
and I mean,
doing I like doing both. Yeah.
it sounds like it's very different. And I was kind of thinking more when I was like thinking on the questions that I wanted us to talk about. I was kind of thinking more on even like the bureaucratic side of things. But now that you put it that way, I'm like, oh yeah, it's just literally a very different way of teaching. And I wasn't even, and I've taken both kinds of classes, but it is really different where um yeah, I imagine the college aspect is almost kind of like more of like teaching art as a lifestyle, or because it's as your career
Yeah.
to be carrying on with you, versus attacking a specific skill set that you're trying to come out of a short amount of time improved
Right.
already.
Well, it's more than teaching a lifestyle. I think it's about take it one step further and make it your life. Right. Something that I tell my students every semester. I probably say it too much to them, but I had a professor in college that kind of called me out. I'm grateful for it to this day, but at the time it kind of stung a little bit. But he kind of called me out for just over planning things and just kind of getting uh, something just so like ton of different ideas in the sketchbook, which is all really helpful when you're a creative professional. But he walked up to me in the student lounge one day and he said, if you would ever just start building one of these things, you'd have something to show for it instead of all these blueprints and plans. And I was like, ouch. um, but I realized he was right. And so um, I encourage my students to not be part-time artists, to be all in every breath they take with their life, even if it's not when they're painting, just to do it as if they're looking through the eyes of an artist. And I think it's a lot easier to make it a career then, really, because you're not like, well, art time is Sundays, right? I I don't have time. I don't have to. I ran out of time. I didn't have enough time to do my art. Well, the reality is that we make that choice. Running out of time is actually a choice.
Mhm.
So I tell that story to my students as if it was my words, but it was really somebody else's. And by golly, some of them really get it after a little while. Yeah.
I love hearing the context of that, because that is literally something that you talked to me about when I was working at the art supply store, and same thing, I remember I was, like, really butthurt about, and you said it, like, very kindly and everything and very gently, but because I would always come to you with my ideas about stuff, and same thing, I had, like, my notebook and stuff and, like, my business plans, and you'd be like, "Okay, like, that's great." But
Yes.
that was something that you, in a kind of a different way that you spun it to me, but that's been really helpful to me since having kids, actually, because
No.
time
Yeah.
is a hot commodity, and I work such a not arts job on my, and anyway, and so in all of my plans and everything, and talking about like, okay, if I plan this and this and everything, you had made the distinction that you're like, okay, like, yeah, like you can do all these things to make it perfect, but like art is just important to be in your life, whether you're in the stage of making money from it
Mhm.
or not. Like you are an artist, so like regardless of whether you're making money from it or not, you're an artist, and you just need to continue, like you said, like you're looking at the lens of your life through the lens of an artist, because that's who you are. And it doesn't, even if you're not to the part yet where you have the perfect business plan and everything is like lining out exactly, dollar signs, like
Yeah.
you just have to keep going, and that's because it's who you are and it's what you do, and life is so much better with art in it. So
Oh my gosh, yes. Yeah. And what do you really want to do? Do you want to make a lot of money with art? Well, then there's the path you can follow for that. It takes a certain level of commitment. If you just want to be happier, um, interjecting art into your life in many different ways might help. And then there's a lot of stuff in between. I talk to a lot of people in their like 40s that are have been really painting quite well for 20 plus years, and I sometimes it always throws me for a loop when I hear them say, I'm working at becoming an artist. Already arrived, dude. You know, you're there. And so I think people need to own that, and just, if you're going to parties, introduce yourself as, oh, I'm an artist. If you're other things too, throw those into the loop, but don't push it aside.
yeah, it's changed. It's like, getting to do this kind of thing with you and the other artists at Black Barn, like it's not traditional, it's not, I'm not painting, but because of me, accepting that I am an artist, even if I'm not in the phase of life where I get to go and spend a lot of time in front of a canvas, I am involved in the arts and I am practicing all the time and what have you. And so it's opened up doors that you might not expect because you just find a way to incorporate it into your life wherever you can incorporate it into your life, and then it
Right.
and then it works out still.
Yeah. It's a better life for sure.
I just love getting that little piece of context because I feel like I didn't have that context when you told it to me before, and I'm
Probably
just like,
not.
why doesn't I don't even remember what I thought about it, but I felt like I felt so judged for a minute, and then as time has gone on and the words have
Good.
just gone through my head over and over, I'm like, no, he was 100% right, and he meant it as lovingly as possible.
I I think human beings in general, not just students, but human beings need a little bit of a reality check, and it doesn't need to be brutal or cruel. But you know, people say a lot. So I'm going to be honest, and you could just be honest anyway. You could make that a pattern. But I find that with our students at the college, that's the best way, is kind of let them be in for about 30 weeks. And, I told some students just the other day, it's like, you came in a little panicked that you didn't have enough time. And then I think you were playing Candy Crush on your phone for 40 minutes.
There it is. There.
So shifting of the priorities. Yeah.
Yeah. So in your work itself, I feel like your stuff goes it kind of swings from being like heavily organic, kind of like subject matter and things like really flowy landscapes and some portraiture and like nature, and then really heavy into architecture and perspective and things that are it's so important to have like structurally correct and like almost mathematically correct.
Okay.
Do you feel like that those kind of two, like that clear separation, is that something that you felt like you had before teaching, or do you feel like it's kind of come from you focusing really hard in teaching? Because obviously we need to know those fundamentals, like those structural fundamentals, but
I think it does come more from teaching, because if I weren't teaching, let's face it, I'd just be doing whatever the heck it is I wanted to do. But the truth is, I discovered along the way that I enjoy helping people, and that I get double the inspiration back for helping somebody achieve what they want to achieve, another milestone and what they're working at. But it's a good point, because like with the structural drawing and the perspective, I think that's always something that I was kind of a nerd about, and I would love doing that stuff anyway. But I began to see it as essential as part of my teaching, because I see that so many people were doing it wrong.
Mhm.
And so there are aspects of drawing and painting that are like that. Most people think art is just a really um, just a type of thing like, well, that's how I felt. So I used that color because, or I made those marks because that's how I felt, just how I was feeling at the time. But when it comes to perspective and like drawing buildings and making convincing 3D space, most of the time there's actually a right and wrong. It's more like a math class, you know.
Mhm.
And so we do this in my drawing classes at NCAD, and I'm also going to be teaching perspective at Black Barn. But you can do 2-point perspective, and you can just get out a ruler with finished work, and you can be like, does this go to the vanishing point? This does, but this doesn't. And so, there's right or wrong. Then there are other aspects, like when I teach watercolor to beginners, we look at reference, but we put it away, and we're just responding to the materials. And this is what the paint will do when it's in a lot of water. This is what happens when you wet the paper first. This is what happens when you have less paint in your brush, and all those things. You're responding to the materials, collaborating with the water. And so those things are a little bit more free flowing. And so we do a landscape from imagination, because I don't want students, if they're beginners and if they are trying to replicate a photo, that's the worst way a beginner could start. So um, I think that's probably more of that organic approach. I also work in different media for my own personal work. So I work in watercolor, I work in a lot of acrylics, but I kind of approach those two mediums in very different ways. Watercolor has one particular sense with a lot of transparency, and I have one way of working with that. And then I think I tend to select acrylics when I just want to start a piece and I want to see where it goes. And I want to plan less, because, as you know, you can just wait 15 minutes and it dries and just continue to change it and paint over it. And so I think this kind of goes back to just, again, having 5 or 6 aisles of art supplies. I'm like, I want to try all this stuff. And so um, I think that's why I tend to do a lot of different stuff. It's why you see, whoops, other way, behind me here, there's like, a Twin Peaks piece of fan art that's really started in acrylic, and I just really wanted to see how it goes. And then up here, there's architectural stuff where I try to get every window just right. Two very different types of work for me, but I love them equally.
Yeah, as you were talking, that's funny that you just pointed out, because as you were talking about it, I'm looking behind you and I'm like, oh yeah, Twin Peaks, organic, acrylic,
Yep.
definitely, like, like visual spatial, like just like exploring. And then yes, like your Italy series where you're doing like specific architecture in Italy in watercolor that needs to like represent a specific place that people know, that's gonna, if something's off with that perspective, then it's gonna be obvious that like something's not quite right in there.
Right. And I like experimenting all the time with other media as well. I'm playing with water soluble graphite right now.
Ooh.
Um, it's great because it's like a watercolor painting, but it looks like it was created in pencil.
When it
Sometimes people look at those things and say, like, how did you get the blending of that pencil so smooth? Well, it's not pencil. So again, with the art supplies thing, I think you have a little bit of this too. It's, I want to do this, and I want to do this, and I want to do this.
I love exploring, and that's why I was just thinking, I'm like, you guys should have like an exploratory supplies day where people can just like try different mediums and check it out, because that
It's a
would
great
be
idea.
so fun.
Yeah.
Because yeah, I'm immediately like, well, what happens when the liquid graphite dries? Can you watercolor over the top of it? Is it going to get muddy? Is it going to blend? Like, now I want to know, and now I want to play with it. Oh, um, so, you have been obviously very, very busy, on top of your own work and doing your, commissioned architecture pieces and your commissioned maps and everything that you're doing, and then teaching at the school. And then you're also leading, facilitating all the classes for Black Barn and getting everybody like, really, really awesome instructors signed up, making sure everyone's timing works out, marketing online. putting it on the website, managing, the enrollment of the classes, following up with people if there's any cancellations and everything. Like there's you're wearing like a lot of hats right now. Um,
Yeah, it's fun.
do you feel like has there something that has stood out to you as like your favorite part of creating Black Barn with Eileen Sorg so far?
There's a lot of things. I think one of my favorite parts is that we were just able to hit the ground running with this last year. Having to start to market it before the building was finished was a really interesting task, but it kind of came along so easily, I think, because Eileen and I had worked together for so much previously. So it's people would look at some of the website and the social media and like, well, James Andrews said this. He said it's like this place has been around for 10 years, and I'm like, well, kind of has. It just didn't have a building, right? And we were just doing these types of things on a smaller scale. Um, so that was kind of like refreshingly easy. And I was like, oh, I thought this part was going to be, more challenging. I really love to be able to trust my gut on which teachers are appropriate uh, for here. And, I've said yes to quite a few folks that have panned out well. And then I've said no to some very wonderful artists. I just didn't think it was just the right fit. But providing an opportunity for them to share, what they're so joyful about with their work. James with his earning a MA and at the Florence Academy, and then just being. I mean, it's not like he couldn't teach without it or anything, but just to be able to segue from that right into this. Betsy Shire, who actually worked at the school long before I ever started teaching there. And she's been doing those encaustic classes, which have just been very inspiring. Elizabeth Van Dyne and her paper cut classes, and I'm sure you know Liz from working at Bainbridge Arts and Crafts and stuff. Kathy Anderson coming in as a printmaking teacher. Like I was there for a couple hours of the lino cut class a couple weeks ago, and it was just like, I love teaching, but I also get a kick out of watching other really great teachers teach. And I kind of learn, oh, I see what she did there. So I think those are some of my favorite parts. Yeah.
What do you feel has been the most challenging so far?
Most challenging is time and time management. Yeah.
For sure.
It's been a lot, and it's can I let's see, how do I put this so it sounds good? Uh, Pleasantly overwhelming.
Yeah,
I think like we're having a very valuable conversation right now, but sometimes I have a lot of very valuable conversations, and then there's a lot of other tasks that I have to be also accomplishing.
Mhm.
But I think we're doing pretty well with it. I think we're just for the last couple months, it's been a lot because we're kind of scheduling out the rest of the year. We're also bringing in, well, Amy DePice comes to this area, usually once a year, but coming in from Thailand. But she's coming in and doing a 2-day workshop in August. And then we're also talking to another artist from Bend, Oregon, Sandra Holtzman. We've got her scheduled, but she's also going to be a 3-day, very creative workshop right after Amy's in August. And so she'll be a kind of our first traveling artist that is coming here and staying here for a little while, and teaching for several days at the studio. So, but there's a lot of work that goes into that.
Yeah, you guys are a small team doing,
Yeah.
handling a lot of things. So, yeah, I can only imagine, there's the checklist is never fully checked off.
Yeah, but I feel like we're getting to a point where if we can fill out our schedule in September and October, and then build the web pages for those, I think we're going to be in really good shape. And just take a little bit of a breather, and then focus on 2025. We're already focusing on 2025.
That's
Some other artists,
amazing.
but
Like, we're
yeah.
not even halfway through this year, and you guys are working on next year. That's awesome.
Yeah, this business is, if you look at artist websites that you know of, that you admire, and they teach workshops and they travel, they're usually booked out a year or two in advance. So you just got to be on the spot with those things.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's nice because you guys are covering so many different mediums and kinda like you said, like, with the encaustic, like, things that, a lot of people don't think right at the forefront of something that they're gonna go take a class in, and so, I love to just go to the Black Barn website and just kind of see what's coming up on classes and just seeing all the different where it's like, "Okay, if I had, all the time to fly up to Washington and, like, all the money to
Mhm.
pay instructors, I could learn how to do, like, 7 different cool new things this summer." It's awesome.
Yeah. It's a fun collection of things.
Yeah. Yeah,
I'm kind of
I'm
surprised we have so many at this point, and Eileen and James and I are all pleasantly surprised, because getting into this, I've facilitated workshops and classes for a number of different organizations, and sometimes things run and sometimes things don't. It's just kind of part of the business. But I'm very pleased to sort of knock on wood somewhere. But everything we've had scheduled for the last 3 months has been running. Part of that is just our instructors realize that we have something very special here, and so if the registration is a little bit low, they agree to continue with it, teach it anyway, because we're trying to build for the long term here, not
Mhm.
for the money or just for the short term or whatever it is.
Yeah,
So yeah, we've got a great team of people, and but we're very pleased with the support that the community is showing us, for sure.
and if someone, is thinking that they would like an opportunity to teach with you guys, we are working on like, kind of an application, right, that they can fill out,
Yes,
otherwise they can just reach out to you by email.
yes, yeah. You can reach me anytime at classes@blackbarnfineartstudio.com. And I'm happy to talk to anybody about that. We are looking for, we're very serious about what we do. We will consider, a variety of different types of instructors, but the good thing about me is, if it's a no, I'll explain why, and I'll respectfully get back to that person. I don't just, I don't like to get people crickets.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't wanna ghost anybody, let them feel just yeah.
Yeah. And I like to meet people and have a conversation about it, most of the time, because I find that if I just put my own judgment on, what I think is right, well, I'm not marketing workshops for me. I'm marketing workshops for other people, and different things appeal to different sorts of people. So different sorts of artists.
Mhm. And you are still instructing on 3 more courses through 2024, right? You still have drawing, you still have a couple of watercolor, and then you're doing the long course with you and James over the summer?
Yeah, and I'm actually going to be teaching quite a bit more
Okay.
as well, but I just haven't plugged that in. And part of that is because I'm the education manager. I'm trying to put my other teachers first, and then I can kind of plug myself in and around other things that maybe don't compete with what they're doing. But yeah, there's let's see, another week or so I'm doing intro to watercolor, but those will keep popping up because you remember I used to teach those at Artist Edge all the time. There's always somebody that's wanting to get started and would like a little help. I'm designing some other watercolor workshops that are kind of in between my beginner course and the long 2-day thing I did with architecture. um, I don't really want to teach painting things that I don't enjoy painting. But I've been finding some other interesting things like wood textures, and I think you might have seen some of those. But textures of stone, and it's a really interesting exercise to paint those in watercolor and kind of learn what the process is of layering and realizing how simple it is. And then a student can then apply it to whatever style painting that they're doing. So there will be more of that. Teaching a perspective class, taking 4 weeks to do that. And then, yeah, James and I are teaching this. We're calling it the Summer Masters Academy because we really actually kind of like teaching at the college. We wanted to provide something that was like a program, not 15 weeks long, but something intensive that really people of most ages could take advantage of. We also wanted something that was available during the summer when older students were out of school and maybe they're thinking about, developing their artistic skills, 15, 16-year-olds, that type of thing. So drawing, Thursdays is going to be drawing and sculpture taught by James. And then Friday mornings is going to be painting taught by me. We're going to tie some things together. And you can sign up for all three at a sweet package price, or you can just sort of a la carte. You can just take the sculpture class like somebody already is. And then Friday afternoons, we're going to have an open studio for any of those students. So if they just want to hang out till 4 o'clock and continue to work on whatever it is they're working on, they can do that.
I love that. It's almost kind of like dipping your toe into art school, like if you are kind of in that in-between stage and you're figuring out where you want to go, it's kind of
Right.
like because, at that at least if they're coming from high school and they've just been doing an art class, like unless you're a student of James Andrews, your art teacher probably doesn't take it super seriously in the public school setting. At least that's been my
Right.
experience. So it's really different getting to go into like a dedicated art space, to get to learn like on an
Right.
ongoing kind of basis.
Yeah, I feel like what Black Barn is going to turn into is kind of like it. There's what I'm doing with it, what Eileen's doing it with it, the other instructors, but we're paying really close attention to the vibe that is happening, and we're listening very carefully to the building itself. Like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And actually, just this morning, I just put this on the website, so I can announce this to the world. But we're letting people come in kind of like an open studio. We're charging for it. It's a very small nominal fee. We're going to start doing every other Thursday evening, like a monitored studio. It's called Working Artists Studio. For anybody of any skill level, if they just want, they're tired of working at their dining room table and they want to come in and vibe with some other artists and sit and draw or paint or make something in clay, they can do that. It's going to be 5 to 8 p.m. every other Thursday,
I
and that's going to
love
start at the end of May. And we've got a schedule that just goes right through most of October.
that's
So that's going to be cool. Not a class, there's no instruction, but James Andrews will be there, or Eileen will be there. I'll do a night. Carly, who's one of our studio tenants upstairs, she's going to do one. It's just going to be really cool because the other thing about the studio, just besides a place to take a workshop, it's just a really cool space to be. And just the building itself, as Eileen has developed it, is just very inspiring, just being there.
Yeah,
So,
and having that time amongst, like, your artist peers, just getting to, like, dedicate some time, even if you don't, come out of something with, like, a finished piece, if you're just going to just kind of, like you said, just to not work, at your dining table or with your kids
right,
running around and stuff, just getting to be amongst other artists who you kind of have, like, that common goal and your brains kinda work a similar way,
right.
that's so special.
Yeah, and I have high hopes that it'll be every week soon, but we're just gonna, everybody's got a busy schedule, so we're just gonna try every other week. If we get a really good response to it right out of the gate, then probably by June or July, we'll just be every week.
That'd be
So
awesome.
I'm really looking forward to that
Yeah, that's gonna be
because it's just another one of those things that, makes it accessible to everybody. And
yeah, if
sometimes, not everybody has $300 for a workshop that they'd like to do, but they could still come and kind of get a sense of things and be inspired by that.
yeah, and have a chance to talk with, professionals, for people who
Mhm.
don't consider themselves a real artist or whatever, coming to talk to people who are doing the thing and like,
Sure.
you know, not have a private coaching session necessarily, but probably get a little bit of feedback, which would be just, yeah, amazing.
Yeah.
Well, before I let you go, I have to ask you, what is something that young Derek, just out of art school, kind of figuring out what you want to do? I guess, I mean, you kind of knew when you were going to work at your family's shop. So I guess we'll put it this way. Just moving away from Maine, coming to Washington, kind of starting your new chapter. What is something that Derek then could have heard from Derek now?
That's a tough one because I actually, as you know me pretty well. I'm pretty happy person, right? So I don't like have regrets or be like, I wish I would have done this differently. Um, I don't know. Advice or something like that?
Yeah, just something that you lovingly now that you look back at Derek then and you're like, "Oh, buddy," and you just, like, coulda just given him a little nugget.
Yeah, I think patience is something that I've learned how to develop, uh, and I actually think that I think people who know me now might think that I'm a pretty patient person, but it always wasn't really, out front there in my younger years. I think I was really in a hurry, uh, as a human being and an artist, to just get stuff done. I learned from a friend of mine when I was like 31 years old, and I tell this story to my students too. But I really didn't understand how to finish a painting successfully until I was 31, and I learned it from a friend of mine. And we were in a gallery together. I had sublet a gallery. Somebody was going to be gone from this gallery in Rockland, Maine for 4 months. They were going to be teaching in Greece, and he said, "Does you know anybody that wants to run a gallery?" And I'm, hello, I'll do it. Um, uh, but my friend Lee was just really slowly, deliberately developing these pieces of artwork, and they were just exquisite, beautiful pieces. But I was just in a hurry, and I work fast, and so I was just into this business of making and selling art, and I felt like my stuff was pretty good at that point, but I was just in a hurry. And so I learned by working with that artist and many others that there are different approaches, and I could take a page or two from them. And you know, now it's like 22, 23 years later, and I've kind of kept developing that patience, letting things develop over time. But yeah, when I was younger, I was in a hurry, very reactionary to things, and so I guess younger Derek, probably at any age under 25, if I could tell him, just slow down a little, buddy, it's going to be okay. Everything's going to work out.
Do you think that you would have listened?
No, probably not.
Probably not. Oh, I love that. That's hilarious. Same. I probably wouldn't have listened either. But just like
Yeah,
how it took me, 4 years after you gave me that bit of advice before I'm like, "Oh, yeah, Derek
yeah.
was right."
Yeah, I mean, the only way we get to do that if we get to borrow the TARDIS from Doctor Who, right? And
Yep. Except even then, that causes all kinds of problems too, so
it's actually good. it's a good question for teachers though, because I feel like when I'm talking to students, I am kind of talking to my younger self a little bit.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
so there is that. It's kind of passing this information down that I learned from somebody else, whether it was my parents or um, professors in college or my art teacher in high school was amazing person in my life, and so it's kind of that. Have patience, take a chill pill, take more time, slow down.
We have time. We have time to
Yep,
continue working on stuff.
yep,
I love that. Well, anyone who is interested in what Derek has in the pipeline, both with him teaching and with all the other people teaching, and other offerings that are coming up, you can check out blackbarnfineartstudio.com. Derek is adding stuff basically every week, it seems
mhm,
like. And the Facebook page is also great to follow. I like getting all the updates, which is just at Black Barn Fine Art Studio, like you can see on our screen here.
yep. And Instagram stories are wonderful. I'm getting addicted to those. So if anybody follows us on Instagram, encourage you to just click on that little airplane share thing and share it to your stories and, tag us back in it. And we'd love some help spreading the word. I think we've done a wonderful job at connecting to so many people. But the truth is that there's so many more that haven't heard about us yet. And we've been open 3 months. So we're a very new business. But um, any of that little help along the way will make a big difference for us.
Yes, yeah. Tell your friends. The peninsula seems like a small community, but it's a pretty big place, and there's a lot of folks out there that really need to like get in touch with those art things that don't know
Yeah.
that don't even know that they have access to it right there in their backyard.
Yep. Absolutely.
Or you can fly into town like I would to see.
Right.
That works too.
We do. We've had some traveling students, a few flying and a few driving from out of state or from the east side of the mountains and stuff like that. So yeah, we've got a little page on our website that recommends some lodging options for people if they want to spend a couple nights here. A lot
Yeah,
of other good things to see as well.
beautiful, beautiful area. It's totally worth going to stay for the art education alone, but also for
Right.
the beautiful scenery and the weather and everything. So,
Yeah.
well, Derek, thank you for taking the time to talk with us today. And I know that you're super busy, so getting to hang out and chat is just always one of my favorite times.
I had a great time with it, Savannah. Thank you so much.
And we'll be seeing you around.
Thank you. See you
Bye.
soon.
Thanks, everybody.